So I am absolutely over the moon to be here with Leah Harris today, and we're just buzzing because we've already spoken, and it's been such a beautiful, energetic conversation. And yeah, Leah, I've been following you for a while now, and people will probably know of you as kind of quite a big mental health activist. And you're a poet, a playwright, and quite outspoken about human rights and mental health. And that's just, your work is amazing. But
thank you so much.
And it's absolute pleasure to have you here as part of the campaign. But it might surprise some people to know that you also have a spiritual side, and I was just kind of overjoyed when you agreed to join the campaign and speak out a little more about that. So I'd love to speak to you a little about that today. And one of the things that you sent me in your kind of bio was the fact that you felt like your soul was called into a turbulent life as part of a mission to kind of heal and awaken as part of your kind of soul path. I just wondered if you'd speak a little bit about that, if you wouldn't mind just describing what you mean by that.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm just equally as honored and excited to be here and participate in what you're doing, Katie. So thank you very much again for having me. So yeah, as I said in my bio, when I went to this astrologer, it was actually the first astrology reading I'd ever had. And she's like, you chose to come into this turbulent life. And she saw it all in my chart. I hadn't even gotten started telling her about myself. You chose to come into this life because you have this huge mission of healing, and your mission is directly tied to the things that you experienced in your childhood. And I see it in your chart, and it's here and here and here. And at that point, I had indeed just started to talk about my journey as a young person and my own sort of intergenerational history of trauma and struggle in our family that got labeled and pathologized. I say in my play that my parents met in a psychiatric hospital in the back ward of an institution, and as far as I know, like, I was conceived there. So
oh wow, what a history!
What a history! Like,
what a start in life! What a start in life!
Back ward. Yeah,
I really want to ask you. I really want to ask you about your play, Leah. But before we talk about that, because I love the title. It's like, oh my God, that so spoke to me. But I'm just wondering because a lot of people kind of come to that realization when they go through the spiritual emergence process that, oh yes, I did choose this life. But actually to be told that, did that kind of piss you off at the time? Were you ready to hear that then? I'm just wondering how that with you.
It was weird. It felt weird to hear that, but at the same time, it made sense because what I was most passionate about was connected to my deepest wounds. And I knew that was like my calling, was to step up in that way and transmute that pain and that suffering and have it mean something beautiful in a way. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it was a little jarring, and I still don't know what to make of that whole everything happens for a reason. I'm just going to leave that to the side because I don't know how I feel about that. I do feel in my case that there was a soul choice to come into a very turbulent, traumatic, intense kind of early upbringing, and to go through all the experiences that I had in the mental health system, and to see everything that my parents went through, to have a lot of losses at a young age, because I felt like it gave me the capacity to have empathy for the experiences of others, number one. Number two, to really be able to make that my life's work was to for my own healing, and to create space for others to heal as well. So yeah, it was definitely strange, but now I feel like it's something that I own. And maybe that doesn't resonate with everybody, and that's totally okay too.
Sure. Yeah. Beautiful. That's like, yeah, you kind of refer to there. It becomes your calling. You're kind of zest for life, if you like. It's like the thing that kind of perpetuates the desire to do what you're doing, and you kind of live that so voraciously now, don't you? And I just wanted to refer to your play, because is it last year that you ran this one woman play, Aliens, Nazis and Angels? Would you just describe a bit about what that's about, Leah, if you don't mind? And presumably that brings in some of your family history and your story.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, and it was, coming up with titles is such a difficult experience. Originally it was called Misdiagnosed, like MISS, like I was in a beauty pageant, diagnosed with the sash across my chest. But no, I settled on that. Felt like it highlighted not only this, like the spiritual journey, but also kind of the way things that are misunderstood get pathologized, and bringing in my intergenerational history. So let's see, where do I start? I guess I'll start with my mother and then kind of backtrack a little from there. Is that, we grew up in this, Jewish American family. We were not directly affected by the Holocaust in terms of losing family that I know of. But my great-grandfather was a refugee from anti-Semitic violence in Eastern Europe. And so that's kind of what brought him to America in the early 20th century. And so in this sort of Jewish American family, there is the value of assimilation. We must blend in. We must not in any way challenge the status quo. We need to be safe. We need to be comfortable, right? So that's the ethos that our family was all about. My mother was the person who first started to challenge that and say, I reject these values upon which our family is, surviving thus far. She was an artist, a very bohemian person. This was in the 1960s. And she ran away from home, or sort of middle-class home in Milwaukee, to join the hippies, right? Just like Summer of Love, like tune in, tap in, turn, whatever, all that stuff, turn on, drop out, whatever. And she somehow lost her way. And this is not uncommon. In fact, when I began Kundalini Yoga and learned about the work of Yogi Bhajan, his first work that he was doing in America when he came to America was working with people like my mother, who were drawn to the hippie movement, who used a lot of psychedelic drugs, had some very bad trips or spiritual experiences gone awry, and helped them heal. And my mom was not fortunate enough to come across Yogi Bhajan in her life experience, so she quickly got shut down, brought into the mental health system. And a big piece of that, her being diagnosed as schizophrenic, was that many of her visions involved these invisible Nazi oppressors that only she could see.
Wow.
And she was kind of holding this fear, this existential fear in our family that nobody else could talk about. The near annihilation of the Jewish people. She was carrying this, and it came out in her quote, visions and delusions, and it was terrifying for all of us.
Wow.
But nobody ever asked her, like, what does this mean to you? It was just sort of, she's schizophrenic, she's crazy, she ruined her life, yada yada yada, right? So that's where the Nazis piece comes in. And I wouldn't realize any of this stuff until years later. I bought into it. I was like, yeah, my mom's crazy, she's like off the chain, right?
And I can so relate to what you're saying. I mean, not the obviously some of the detail, but the intergenerational trauma, then the patterns that are kind of brought through and try and heal and be birthed through our family, and that were then pathologized. Obviously your mother didn't have the spiritual framework within which to understand her experiences at that time. And so is that the difference for you now, Leah? Did you kind of manage to kind of get this different conceptual framework within which to understand what you were experiencing? Is that what helped you, do you think, come out of that identifying with labeling, or how did that kind of shift for you from what your mum experienced to then how you kind of played that out within your own life? What happened?
Yeah. You know, I think I learned from my mother's experience, and in ways that for a while didn't serve me, but I also learned from her experience in many ways that also helped me a great deal. I internalized this message that to be different, to be artsy, to be creative, to think differently, like that this is scary and can end up with you being institutionalized for life, you know. And she passed away quite young. And I, you know, so there was that piece of me that's like, oh my God, I have to be normal. You know, I have to just like have a career and like put on a suit. Like when I escaped from the mental health system, is like a whole story in and of itself. But, you know, I have to be normal, and I can't, you know, I'm going to Washington, D.C., and I'm going to be this person that's like an international diplomat, and I'm going to blah, 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 you know, just, I had this vision of how my life was going to be. And it was going to be that I would never speak of any of this stuff.
Yeah.
I would walk as a, you know, passing amongst the normals, and that's how I was going to do it. I'm not going to end up like her. But you know, it's just, I couldn't do it.
Couldn't fit in with the normals when you've been feeling like an alien.
No, I couldn't, you know, I did it, but I couldn't do it, you know.
Yeah.
So I went through quite a crisis in my mid-20s. This is right before I got into the movement. And I went back to the mental health system because I didn't know what else to do. I was terrified of creativity and spirituality, all these things I had associated with my mother's pathology, right? Quote, pathology. Yeah. And so I went back to the mental health system at my university, and they, you know, they heard my story. The psychologist was like, you need to be on meds with your family history. You need to be on meds. And I was like, well, meds, like, you know, they have never worked for me. In fact, they've made things worse. She said, well, there's new ones now. So I went and I talked to the psychiatrist, and he said, go buy this book, Listening to Prozac. Buy this book, read this book. It'll totally convince you that you need to be back on meds. And still like do a little, you know, I go to the bookstore looking for the book, and instead I find Talking Back to Prozac by Peter Breggin. And I, you know, pick it up, I read in one sitting, I'm like, oh my God, this is everything that ever happened to me. And I consider that to be a divine intervention. Yes. When I look at that, that moment in time, I could have gone in like two different ways. Like, because still wasn't really questioning the paradigm. I was kind of still bought into it, right? And so I feel like that was a divine intervention in that moment, that one book, you know, call it synchronicity, call it what you will. Yeah. Was not there. And then I wrote to Peter Breggin, and he actually like wrote back. And he connected me to the movement. I said, I want to tell my story. And so that just set me off on this whole other trajectory where I was like, I'm not even going to try to pass amongst the normals anymore. Like, I'm not going to be with my suit. Some kind of like evil international diplomacy. Like, I'm just going to be out here and try to change the system and speak up about what I've known.
Thank you, Peter Breggin.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. It was a magical moment of synchronicity that completely changed my life.
Wow. How long ago was that, Leah?
That was in, oh my gosh, the year 2000? 2001?
Wow.
Somewhere in there. I want to say 2001.
Wow.
Chunk of years ago.
Incredible. So just to go back to your play and the angel part.
Ah, yes.
So do you mind giving us just a bit more bit of juicy detail about what your spiritual experiences have entailed? Because I know you've not been that open about these kind of historically, and like we've spoken about before, like you kind of almost have to, you know, create this professional image of an activist before you start to speak out about this really more controversial stuff and being taken seriously. And
no, thank you. It's been as with many people, I've always had those kinds of spiritual leanings, but they terrified me and they got me in trouble. You know, from the get-go, I I lived in fantasy worlds as a young girl, and I, gone through a lot of trauma. And I just remember, like, before I came into this life, I remember what it was like. And I wanted to go back there. Like, it's very hard to describe, but I would sort of lay on the grass for hours and stare at the sky. And just have these, not even concrete memories, but just the visceral feeling of being in the spirit world. And the beauty of that. And I was like, what am I doing here in this reality, this body? And why? And I would ask my grandmother, I was taken away from my mom. So I was raised by my grandmother, who was this woman who tried to keep my mom in her place due to her own issues and pain and unresolved stuff. Like, no judgment of her. And she was freaked out. I'd be like, why am I here? Ask these questions at 7 years old.
Wow.
Why am I here? Like, well, because you're just here. You're here. That's why you're here. You're here. And I'd say, well, maybe. And it just got to the point where I was like, maybe I shouldn't have been born. And it's like, suicidality, instead of this like young child trying to make sense of her existence, suicidality, mental illness, I need to drug that child. And so I learned it was not okay to ask questions, and definitely being in the mental health system, it's not okay to ask questions. But I always had these spiritual yearnings. I mean, I was like reading about philosophies of India and William James, varieties of religious experience when I was like 12 years old. I just always was interested. I read all this stuff, Ken Kesey and Alan Watts, but I always looked at it intellectually, like, oh, this stuff is so interesting. It's fascinating. I'm interested in this, but I never was able to figure out, how do I apply this to my own life? Like, it's just all intellectuals all up in here. And I forgot about it. I got caught up in the system. I got caught up in a lot of drugs. And I know it was about trying to change the way I felt and feel that spiritual connection and this kind of pharmaceutical, not pharmaceutical, but this sort of to put something physical into my body to change me, rather than being able to access those states within myself. Right. And I really, the last time, I guess, one of the biggest and most profound mystical experiences I had that really woke me up and shook me up was when I was 18 years old and was told I would have to be in this horrible group home for the rest of my life. And this is where the angels comes in. This is where the angels come in.
Wow.
And it's a horrible place where no one should have to be for like 5 seconds, let alone their whole life. And I was like, well, I'm going to end it. I'm just going to end it. Like, I'm not signing up for this. This is not going to happen. And I was very detached from my spirituality, but I took the pills and I just prayed. And there's a scene in the play, and I'm praying to God. I don't know what to call this thing. I'm praying to angels. I'm praying to whatever I can think of. But my prayer is actually like, just let me die. Let me go back to that memory of what, my life in the spirit world. And I'm done. This life, I'm done with it. And I took the pills. I had lit a candle and I put it on the bedside, and I didn't put the candle in anything. I just plopped this candle there and I went to sleep. A few hours later, I wake up to this huge flame. The candle had caught fire to these papers on the table, and there's this gigantic 6 inches from my head.
Wow.
And if I had slept, 2 minutes longer, I would have burned to death and maybe burned down all the women in the house. Because they were all sleeping too. And there was like this voice was like, wake up! And I woke up and I had the wherewithal to like put the fire out somehow, some way. And the voice was just like, go girl, go, like everything was told to me. This is how you save yourself, And that was to me a profound, like the first divine intervention that made me realize, like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to be here. Like my prayer did not get answered. My prayer got answered in another way, not in the way that I expected. I guess I'm supposed to be here.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
that's a moment in my play when I kind of realized that I have some reason, some calling, like for all intents and purposes, I should have been dead.
Mm,
Something stopped me from dying, and it was not of me. It was a supernatural,
yeah.
spiritual, mystical experience.
Wow.
So, and I never talked about it in those terms. I just said, "Oh, I almost died in a group home, and now I'm, I realized, I was supposed to be here." Like, I never included that dimension, like, because it was felt too scary to talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
But I talk about it in the play, and it was really freeing to do that.
Wow.
And
Gosh.
so, yeah.
So kind of, yeah, resonates with me, and I totally understandable why you'd be so frightened to talk about that because of your mum's experiences. But I was just thinking about how that paradox and that proximity of the alien and the angel, when we're a child and we're growing up and feeling like we don't fit into this world and feeling like you're an alien, and yet there's that kind of also angelic sense of somewhere deep inside there's this kind of deeper meaning. And would you say it was the experience of kind of almost touching death that made you want to live life to the full, or did that come later on? Did it take quite a while for you to kind of get to that point?
It was definitely a sense of I'm not supposed to die. I'm supposed to be here. And so you're right. And so out of that realization, I began to take action on my own behalf, which is what got me the hell out of that group home.
Is this
Because
the
I was
escape
very
story?
resigned.
I want to hear the escape story.
I mean, I was so resigned that this is just my life. This is my life. I have 5 mental health diagnoses. I'm gonna end up just like my mom.
Well, when you're told that you're never going to, you're going to be there for life, you've got this label for life, you're going to be on medication for life, don't really hope for much in your life. It's like, there's no wonder people, and then.
Yeah, I was 18 years old. I mean, what did I know? And so I reached out to my grandmother, and we had a very contentious relationship. But she was the only person, who I could think of to reach out to. I didn't know who else could help me. And that I consider then the follow-up miracle. I have a scene in my play where I'm like, all right, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to tell her, Grandma, like, please get me out of here. Like, I have to leave this place. I'm going to die in this place.
God.
And she was like, well, the doctors say you need to be there. And I said, I'm going to die in this place. And she took a big sigh, and she's like, all right, you can come home on 2 conditions. Stay off the drugs and you finish high school. I was like, okay, you do anything. Yes. So, she and I had a very challenging relationship, and we have, healed that. She's passed on, but that has all been healed. But at that time, like, I think that was another divine intervention because, she just had also kind of given up on me to some degree and thought I was just going to end up just like my mother. And there's this mental illness in the family, but she took me back at that time when I needed help. And it was from there that I just started to dig myself out of that hole that I had, fallen in, been put in.
Wow.
I think that was a miracle. It really was.
Yeah. So it's almost like she created this safe space for you to heal yourself, like this, in the same way that you're doing for other people now, is like you talk about, holding space for people to find their inner healer. So that, yeah, beautiful. It kind of, you both had the resolve to do that. And it just shows how bad your experience was of the system to kind of, think, okay, I just have to get out of here. And yeah, incredible. So,
and for a long time, I thought it was luck. I was like, I was really lucky. I'm so lucky, and maybe that's a piece of it, but now I just look at it as different. Like, I just feel that there's been divine intervention in my life at critical points, that without that, I would have been lost or dead or not doing what I'm doing now.
yeah, I mean, divine intervention, but also, a hell of a lot of inner strength and personal resolve as well. I mean, you don't get as far as you've got, Leah, by just divine intervention. We can't just pray and, light a candle and it's all fine. So I just, I'd really love for you to share as well, because, this path isn't easy. what you have done to kind of help build your resolve and your resilience and your self-confidence to get to the point where you are strong and able to share as openly as you are now, and share your story, and you're doing amazing projects as well and activism. What happened kind of in between, deciding, right, I don't want this life for myself, I'm going to go and make something of myself, to get into where you said, you had all this internalized beliefs about yourself as not being worthy? How did you get from there to doing the amazing things you're doing now? What any practices that you could share with people that could kind of help them now along this path to walking away from the identifying with being ill to being something and living their calling?
Yeah, no, I love this question. Yeah, it's practices and processes is kind of how I look at it. The first thing that needed to happen for me was I needed to get angry. Oh, like I had so much rage inside about what had been done to me and what had been done to my parents. And
yeah,
I didn't even know I could be angry about that. I had turned it inward into self-hatred and internalized stigma, or whatever the hell you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
It was so important for me to get really angry, which is also not okay in the mental health system, right?
I'm really pleased you've said this, because it's such a taboo, isn't it? And it's like, there's so much guilt and shame that's generated around anyone that's angry, and it's like it's justified anger. You have every right to feel angry and express that anger. And so I'm really, really glad that you've kind of, given people permission for that. And it's not giving people permission to be angry at people. It's like, obviously you've got to find ways to express it. But yeah.
It was essential. It was essential for me to get angry and be angry for as long as I needed to. And I'm still angry about what's happening to people. And so, that's really where the creativity and the spirituality started to kick in. So I'd say the first practice or process for me, and I see this inseparable from spirituality, was writing poetry and creativity. And my mom had been a poet. So again, it was about rewriting my story that it's okay and it's safe to be a creative person in this world. That's going to be okay. And so starting to write poetry, starting to share my poetry, starting to just write and express it. And so much of it was just about getting my anger out. I mean, I wrote this one poem. It was like, "Dear Doctor, Hippocrates' bones are twitching in his grave." I had to write that.
Yeah.
But
that's a healthy way to express, isn't it? You're not harming anyone.
Oh, good. And I had, when I was in the movement, people were like, "Yeah, teenage mental patient." Yeah, I was just being received with love and we want more. So I felt this encouragement and love from my people to keep going. And so that was super important, right? But then there was a point where, I don't know what conversation this was, but we were talking about this masculine energy of go, 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 do. There's so much injustice. And I was young too. I had a lot of energy, but I ran myself into the ground, quite literally. And I started having a lot of physical health issues, which was really related to my unresolved trauma. So a lot of physical pain that literally stopped me. Had a real kind of crisis where I had a fellow activist who was suicidal, and I couldn't support her because I had dealt with my own stuff around being suicidal. I just hadn't. I was like, the system is fucked, but I hadn't started to heal myself, right?
Yeah.
And that was a huge wake-up call. I'm like, here I am running around the world, we need peer support and understanding suicidality and alternative state. I'm saying all this stuff, but I'm not living it. And so that's when I needed to slow down. And I remember I had to give a talk, and I was driving to the talk, and I had never gravitated towards mindfulness or meditation. But I bought this audiobook by Thich Nhat Hanh, Master Thich Nhat Hanh, about creating true peace. And I was like, I need to have a practice. I need to have my own practice. Like, I cannot be an effective change agent in this world just constantly with like my foot on, the accelerator and never on the brake. Like, just, I need to find that balance. And so I began a meditation practice, and I started with what is called Vipassana, or insight meditation, which is about following the breath, working on the level of thought, working on the level of physical sensations in the body, and just really building that really powerful mind, body, spirit connection, and learning to be with difficult emotions without feeling like push them away or fully just get engulfed by them, so that was huge. But it was really the loving kindness practice, or what is called metta meditation, that caused me to have a huge opening around healing my past. That girl inside of me who wanted to die was still in there. And I had not befriended her. I didn't want to acknowledge her. I was like, I'm better now. I'm activism kicking in. I'm going to fight this stuff. Fuck all of you. So I didn't want to acknowledge her. And so through the practice of loving kindness, that brings up all your stuff that you don't love. Right? You think it's like, it's all this loving kindness. It's so lovely. No. It brings all your shit like, woof.
Yeah.
And I just remember I had this moment where I just was in the hall. I got up, I left the hall, and just sat on this hill, and I just howled for her. I howled for the pain that this girl had felt, and was able to befriend her. And that changed everything.
That's huge, isn't it? I think to go from like externalizing everything to actually, that's huge insight, to stop and realize that you've got to hang on a minute. I can't carry on doing this. I've got to stop and kind of go within is such an important shift. And I think, for this movement as well that we're both involved in, there is still so much of this anger and blame and kind of projection. And it's like, we have to be kind outside and externally. We have to do this, like you said, loving kindness, and go into the sadness and the pain of the healing that takes. Like, that vision of you sitting and howling on the hill is beautiful. And I think vulnerability is such an important part of this, isn't it? And like, actually doing that is a lot braver and stronger than just like living in this masculine energy all the time where we're kind of just fighting and rolling forward. Thank you for sharing that. I think, gosh, everything you've just said there is like, stages of my own healing as well, and kind of continuously still going on. And I think so many of us speak about the same things in this movement. It's incredible. Just wanted to kind of talk to you as well about what you're doing now in relation to everything you're talking about. So you're a mentor for people who have kind of gone through trauma, and you talk about holding space and allowing people to kind of awaken to their own gifts. Would you mind talking a bit about how you do that, with how you work with people, and do you bring in anything that you've just mentioned into your practice?
So it's so interesting that you asked me that question, because I feel like I'm a little bit at this point in my life on a bit of a crossroads, I would say. I think the way that I've helped people to transform, or kind of held the space for people to transform, is through supporting storytelling and supporting people to kind of rewrite or revision the way that they see themselves, and to bring that new story into their activism work, to create change and talk about challenging things like healing after suicide attempts. And so it's kind of been mostly on the level of storytelling. When I'm working in the system, training providers and whatnot, I don't feel like I can bring in the spiritual aspect much. I can touch on it. Like I'll talk about the power of mindfulness practices. Those things have a lot more acceptance in our society today. So I can talk about my mindfulness practice now in a general way, but I can't go into it, or I feel like I can't go, I should say, I feel like I can't go into it in the depth that I would like to. And so, my hope is that in my work going forward, that I can start to do that, a little bit more of that, in the role of coach, in the role of a coach or whatever. I have just been certified as a life, spiritual, and energetic coach by the Artist of Spirit training program. Yeah, so I'm hoping to be able to do more of that work, like one-on-one.
Please do.
Yeah.
I love how this bridge is forming. It's like, people like you who are really well respected in this movement, are really opening up now to this. And I think the more of us that do, the more people will listen, and it's going to be taken seriously. And we so need that, don't we? And it just feels like the next step, doesn't it? Kind of, it's just in the next evolutionary steps. We've kind of normalized mental distress now, and it's time to normalize spiritual experiences. And I mean, everything you've spoken about, it's so natural, it's just part of being a complex human being, isn't it? It's not woo-woo or kind of out there, or it's just part of kind of human nature. So in relation to what you're doing now and your trajectory and your new project and storytelling, did you so you're writing a new book based around helping people share their stories and story warriors?
Yes, I have such a hard time with titles. That's what I have right now, story warriors. We'll see how story warriors will stick. But no, it's really just this idea, and it's so in sync with what you're doing with Emerging Proud, is that a really important part of my path was, first of all, rewriting my own story. I work with this incredible coach named Gail Larson, who talks about the old story and the new story. And creating that space for people to, number one, formulate their new story and figure out what their, what she calls original medicine. What is their gift? What have they learned? What is that piece that they want to share with the world, to change the world, to help heal. So this book is really encouragement, stories, what I've learned along the way, like a little bit of my own journey, a little bit of other people's journeys, to really encourage people to find a way to express that new story inside of them, and help to sort of uplift everyone else in doing so.
Yeah, beautiful vision, beautiful. And I just, when I learned about what you're doing, it's like, oh my gosh, it feels like we're kind of tapping into the same instructions from universal consciousness. It's like, we're all kind of doing the same thing, but slightly differently. And it's just beautiful. It feels like, I was saying to you earlier, I've found my tribe, and, connecting with people like you and, all over the world. It's really, really beautiful that we can connect at such a deep level through this movement. So I'm so grateful to you for everything you're doing and for helping me find my bravery. You've been doing this for years, so people like you have kind of led the way for me as well. I'm really, really grateful for that. And just wanted to end with your vision. Like, what's your big vision, Leah? I know you're kind of really into human rights and, changing things on a big scale. What would your vision look like for a society that's kind of, healed or more open to this? What do you kind of hope to achieve through your work?
I think the biggest thing is this very powerful and subversive knowledge that we can heal ourselves. And not that this has to be done in isolation. Of course, I believe in all the support and all the community as part of that, but that we have the ability to heal ourselves. We don't need outside authorities to tell us what to do. We don't need that. We don't need to depend on external conditions or substances to heal. that we have the capacity through and it looks different for every single person. I just want people to know that you have this power, you have this capacity, despite what you have been told and despite all the lies that have been told to you. And I feel like if people really knew that and had permission to discover what that looks like for them, we would have a completely different world.
Yeah.
Of people who are empowered and connected on a mind, body, spirit level and to one another.
Yeah, it's so true. It makes it sound so simple, doesn't it? It kind of makes us realize how crazy the whole, mental health, mental illness paradigm is when we talk about this, because it just feels so natural, like trauma is just a natural emergence process, like you described, looping back to when you were a child and kind of this existential questioning, what's life about, is about something more. And the fact that you felt like you did choose to come into your life so that you could be part of this and kind of lead this movement for change. It's just it's so incredible.
It really is. It's just been a magical, like a roller coaster ride, and I'm still on it, and I'm still loving it.
It never ends, does it?
It never ends, and it's the challenges continue. I mean, at every layer, there's a new insight and awakening, and I'm just thankful for everyone.
Yeah. Thank you. So, where can people find out what you're up to, Leah? And can people access the play that you were just talking about? Is there any recording of that anywhere, or a website that people can go to see anything or read about that or find about what you're doing now?
So I have, there is a recording that I have neglected to put on the website, but this one is going to happen this year.
I'd love to see it.
It's thank you. It's called so the website for the play is aliensnaziangels.com. My personal website is Leah, LeahIdaHarris, LeahIdaHarris.com. And I'm also very active on Instagram, but it's under the, it's at Rewrite the Story is my Instagram name. So I post a lot of stuff on Instagram as well. You can find me on Facebook. I'm not that easy to, I'm very easy to find, I should say. I'd love to hear from anyone.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm so overjoyed to be kind of working with you in this movement and just collaborating. And I just feel like, I couldn't wish for better company in this movement as people like you. You're inspiring and energizing, and you've been doing this for 15 years now, so incredible. Here's to many more. Thank you.
Likewise. Such a joy to know you, and I hope we get to connect in person one day.
Absolutely, I'm sure we will. Thank you so much for Emerging Proud.
You bet. Thank you for holding the space.
Bye.